This is the Life by Design worksheet tutorial. Before we get started, I want you to know that the numbers we're going to use in this tutorial are sample numbers. They have no tie to reality. The tax rate that I'm using in this tutorial is 30%. I did that to make the math easy. You'll want to use your actual tax rate that you can determine from your accountant or from your previous tax returns. So the first part of the worksheet is profit allocations. This is the profit that you've earned after you've paid your personal expenses. So how do we allocate that additional profit? The very first thing we want to do is pay off debt. There's an old saying that says, keep your debt low and get it to zero. Next, we want to save an emergency fund. That is 3 to 6 months of expenses, personal expenses, in a savings account. If you've got more than 6 months of expenses in a savings account, there's probably a better place to put that money so that it can go to work for you. Next, we're going to move on to asset acquisition. Do we want to buy a rental property, a second home, stocks, bonds, invest in our portfolio, our 401k, etc.? And then lastly, we want to use some of that money to have fun because after all, life should be fun. Next, we're going to talk about how to calculate the amount of money we need to set aside for tax. How do we calculate the amount of money we need to set aside to pay taxes on our gross profit? Step one, we're going to determine our tax rate. You can ask your accountant or figure it out from your previous tax returns. Next, we're going to subtract that tax rate percentage from 100%. And finally, we're going to divide our profit total goal by the percentage we found in step number 2. The result is the total gross compensation income we've got to earn to cover our profit goal and pay the tax. In this example, we're going to say that 100% of our profit goal is $100,000. We're using a sample tax rate of 30%. 100% minus 30% equals 70%, or otherwise known as 0.7. Moving over to this column, if we want to achieve a profit goal after tax of $100,000, we're going to divide $100,000 by 70%, or divide $100,000 by 0.7. The number we're going to come up with is $142,857.14. Now we know that in this example, we need to make $142,857.14 in order to meet our profit goal and pay taxes. Next, you'll need to find your average compensation per transaction. If you're new, or you don't know your actual average compensation per transaction, which, by the way, if you've been in business at KW for a while, you can download your multi-year trends report and you can see your average compensation per transaction. If you don't have that number, ask your market center leadership what the average compensation per transaction is for your office and use that number for this year, and next year you'll have a personalized number. For this example, we're going to use an average compensation per transaction of $8,000. Now that we know we're making $8,000 per unit, we need to divide our total goal of $142,857.14 by the average compensation of $8,000. And when we do that, we come up with 17.857 units. We need to round that up because most of us don't sell 0.857 of a house. So rounding 17.857 up, we come up with 18. So we need to close 18 units with an average compensation per unit of $8,000 in order to achieve our profit goal of $100,000 after we pay tax. Next, we're going to fill out our Life by Design form. So we start at the top with profit allocations. This is the money we earn after we've paid our personal expenses. These are things that you will pay for once you've taken care of your basic expenses. For instance, we want to pay off debt first, and let's say I got a credit card, a balance of $9,757.32. And we want to be as accurate as possible. In order for this to work best, we need exactly the amount that we owe, to the penny even. So do what you will, but I like to have accurate numbers. Next, we're going to have an emergency fund. I'm going to use 3 months of personal expenses. If you look down here, you'll see that my annual personal expenses is $102,000. And if I divide this by 12 months, I find my monthly amount, and I multiply that times 3, and I come up with $25,623.50. That's the amount I need in my emergency fund. Obviously, to get to this number, you're going to have to fill out the personal expenses part next. All right, what's my next priority? I want to save up a down payment for a rental house. Mortgage payments or mortgages are debt, but they're good debt because mortgages on rental homes are paid by someone else. So the down payment for a rental house, let's say I need $40,000 for that. And when I get those 3 things accomplished, I'm going to take my family on an all-inclusive vacation because they deserve it. They put up with me for an entire year. And I've priced that out at about $8,000. Now, if I add all these numbers up, I come up with $83,380.82. That is the amount of money that I need after tax. So remember the previous formula. I divide this number by 70% or 0.7 if I've got a 30% tax rate, which is the rate we're using here. You use your actual tax rate and do the calculation and figure that out. So if we need to net 83,380.82 after tax, then when we divide this number by 0.7, we're going to come up with this number, $119,115.46. So we divide this number by 0.7 to come up with this number. Well, what's this number in the middle? This is 30% of this bottom number, and this does not auto-calculate. So to get this number, if you want it, which I would calculate it, I'm going to take this number and I'm going to multiply it by 30% or 0.3, and I'm going to come up with this number. If I'm using $8,000 per transaction, I divide $119,115.46 by 8,000. I come up with 13 point something. I'm going to round that up to 14 units. So I need to sell 14 units at $8,000 commission each in order to hit this number. Next, we're going to go to our personal expenses, and you need to find out exactly what your monthly payments are and then multiply those by 12 to come up with your annual payment. So my house payment is $2,700 and change, I believe. So when I multiply it times 12, it comes to $33,227.16. Food, including restaurants and groceries, who knows? I'm going to estimate about $900 a month or $10,800 per year. If you know your actual numbers, then use your actual numbers. How much do I pay for electricity, gas, internet, cable TV, home phone, etc.? Well, on an annual basis, we're going to spend about $5,962.32. And then we're going to go to monthly payments on student loans and credit cards. For this equation, I just used the top number, the total credit card debt divided by 35, which is usually like the minimum payment you're going to make is 1/35 of the total amount. When I annualize that, that comes up to about $3,345.37. For pet care expenses, if we're spending about $120 a month on pet care, then that equals $1,440 per year. And then when we got a child care, tuition, etc., I came up with $480 a week times 50 weeks because I'm going to take 2 weeks off and take my kids with me. So I come up with $24,000 in child care expenses. And then next I go down to auto insurance, repairs, and maintenance. Since I own my car and my company doesn't, I'm personally paying for my auto insurance, my repairs, and my maintenance. And that came out to about $2,631.30 last year. Next, I'm looking at health and life insurance and medical bills. And when I annualized my health and life insurance and medical bills, I came up with the number of $17,487.84. Next, how much am I spending on entertainment, lifestyle, hobbies, and miscellaneous? Well, I work all the time, don't have any hobbies, so I don't have any idea what you might spend on a hobby, but I estimated $300 a month, and $300 a month times 12 is $3,600. When we add these all up, we come up with this number right here, $102,493.99. That's how much I need to pay my personal expenses this year. So I'm going to divide this number by 70% or 0.7. Remember, I'm using the 30% tax bracket here. So I'm dividing this number by 0.7. I come up with this number, $146,419.99. The difference, if I subtract this number from this number, I come up with a total tax liability of $43,926. This is the number that I'm really focusing on because this is how much money I need to make in order to pay my personal expenses and pay taxes. So when I divide this number by the $8,000 per transaction, what I come up with is 18 and change. And so we're rounding up to 19 units in order to pay my personal expenses yearly. Next, we're going to move down to the section that's our business cost of sale and expenses. My market center cap is $18,000. My royalty is $3,000. I'm not doing any team member splits, so my cost of sale on an annual basis is $21,000. Now, I do not have any employees, so I'm not paying salaries and benefits, etc. If I did, I would put that number in here, and I would include employer tax, insurance, and all those things. Next, how much am I spending on lead generation and listing management? And I'm spending about $240 a month. So when I multiply that times 12, I come with $2,880 a year. Occupancy, my office rent is $250 a month, times 12 is $3,000. When I look at education and coaching, I am not spending a lot of money here. I think that number is actually supposed to be $15,000, but we'll keep going. If I'm not in coaching, I'm spending about $1,550 per year on education. And next, I'm spending about $70 a month on office supplies. Times 12 is $840. And then my cell phone bill and internet bill, etc., is about $157 a month, I believe I calculated here. So times 12, I'm looking at $1,884. And then my automobile, this is primarily for my business expense of my automobile. I'm paying myself on average about $900 a month in mileage. I use the IRS rate for mileage. I reimburse myself for that mileage. That's my company, I should say, my business reimburses me for that money. And it comes to about $10,800 per year, which, by the way, you can pay for a pretty nice personal car with $10,800 per year. Next is equipment and furniture. Do I need to upgrade my desk? Do I need to fix my chair, etc.? Don't spend a lot of money on that. Usually those are one-time costs. So we calculate about $50 a month or $600 a year for that. And then for my errors and omissions insurance, it's $50 a month. So I'm going to calculate that at $600. When I add these up, I've got a total annual expense $22,154. That's my annual expense. I pay these expenses whether or not I sell real estate. And then I'm going to add my cost of sale, which is $21,000, to this number, and I come up with $43,154. Now you'll notice that there is no tax calculation on these numbers. Why not? Because I'm not paying tax on the money that I have to make in order to pay my business expenses. This is all pre-tax. So my total number is $43,154. Remember, I'm making $8,000 per transaction. When I divide $43,154 by 8,000 and then round up to the nearest whole number, I come up with 6 units. I need to sell 6 units to pay my business expenses. Moving on down, I'll copy the numbers from the first part of the sheet. My Life by Design, I needed 14 units to fund my Life by Design. I need 19 units to fund my personal expenses. I need 6 units to fund my cost of sale and business expense. When I add those up, I have 39 units, and now I need 39 units to fulfill my financial goal, pay my personal expenses, fund my Life by Design, pay taxes, and all of my business expenses. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. You've got my phone number, you've got my email address, and I hope you found this video useful.